Look at that piece of junk. Old man driving a trash heap. Laughter erupted as the rusted pickup pulled into the parking lot. The driver, gray-haired, weathered, never flinched. He just stared straight ahead, hands gripping a steering wheel, scarred by memories no one could see. A black government SUV screeched to a halt. 4 armed soldiers jumped out, followed by a general with stars on his collar. The crowd fell silent as the general marched straight to the old truck. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He saluted. If you believe respect is earned in silence, comment salute below. Emmett Harlan, 77, had stopped expecting respect long ago. His 1967 military-issued Chevy pickup, dented, rusted, held together by willpower, was a perfect reflection of its owner, battered by time but refusing to quit. The once olive paint had faded to a patchwork of primer and rust, but the engine still roared to life every morning without complaint. That Tuesday, Emmett drove into town for his weekly supplies parking near Riverside Coffee, where young professionals gathered to start their day with $7 lattes and social media updates. A group of men in designer clothes immediately took notice, pointing and snickering. "Look at that museum piece. Probably needs a tetanus shot just to ride in it," one called out. "Hey Gramps, the junkyard's 3 blocks over," another shouted, pulling out his phone to record what he thought would make perfect social media fodder. Emmett stepped out slowly, his movements deliberate, measured, a career soldier's posture, even at his age. He'd commanded transport units through 3 conflicts, moved wounded men through active combat zones, survived things that still woke him at night. These boys with their perfect hair and soft hands, they weren't even worth acknowledging. As he walked toward the grocery store, he heard more comments. "Those veteran plates have to be fake. Nobody keeps a vehicle that pathetic. Probably some homeless guy living in it. Should call code enforcement." Emmett kept walking. 27 years in Special Forces operations had taught him when to engage and when to maintain silence. This wasn't worth the breath it would take to respond. When he returned with his modest bags of groceries, a small crowd had gathered around his truck. A social media influencer with an expensive camera was posing next to the rusted tailgate, making exaggerated gestures of disgust for his followers. "This has to be the ugliest vehicle in the state. Let's watch if this ancient piece of history even starts, or if we'll need to call the archaeology department." Laughter followed, a few uncomfortable glances from passersby, but no one intervened. Emmett loaded his groceries carefully in the passenger seat, then slid behind the wheel. The worn leather seat had molded to his body over decades, fitting him like a well-broken-in combat boot. His calloused fingers brushed briefly against the sun visor, where a faded photograph was secured with yellowing tape. 8 young men in uniforms, standing proudly beside this very truck in a distant desert. Only 3 made it home. To these laughing strangers, the truck was a joke. To Emmett, it was the last witness to the greatest moments of his life, the only thing that had followed him from war to peace, from youth to old age. He didn't turn the key immediately, just sat straight-backed and expressionless as the mockery continued outside. But someone was watching, someone who recognized this particular vehicle model, someone who understood exactly what those specific dents on the driver's side door actually meant. The black government SUV appeared without warning, tires squealing as it made a sharp turn into the parking lot. Its approach silenced a few of the hecklers, but most continued their taunting, emboldened by their audience. The influencer was live streaming now, narrating his mockery to thousands of followers. "This thing belongs in a crusher, not on public roads. I'm performing a public service here, people." The SUV skidded to a stop directly behind Emmett's truck, blocking it from exit. Its government plates and tinted windows immediately commanded attention. 4 military police officers emerged, first combat boots, hitting pavement in perfect synchronization. Their faces were impassive weapons, visible but holstered. They formed a perimeter without speaking a word. Then the back door opened. General Terrence Shaw, Vice Commander of Joint Special Operations Command, stepped out. 4 stars gleamed on his collar. Combat ribbons lined his chest in ordered rows. His face bore the hardened look of a man who had given difficult orders and lived with their consequences. The crowd fell completely silent. The general surveyed the scene with a single sweep of his eyes, taking in the laughing young men, the influencer still holding his camera, and Emmett sitting motionless in his truck. He walked forward with measured steps, ignoring everyone else. The MPs maintained their positions, creating a corridor of authority through the now stunned onlookers. The influencer's live stream continued, but his narration had faltered into confused silence. This wasn't the content he had expected to capture. The general stopped directly beside Emmett's driver's side window. Without hesitation, he raised his right hand in a perfect regulation salute. Emmett looked up, recognition crossing his weathered features. He opened the door and stepped out automatically, straightening to his full height despite the pain in his back. Years fell away from his posture as muscle memory took over. He returned the salute with a precision that needed no uniform to convey its authenticity. "Sergeant Major Harlan," the general said, voice carrying clearly to the hushed crowd. "It's been too long, sir." "General," Emmett acknowledged with a slight nod. "Didn't expect to see you here. I was en route to Fort Carson when my aide recognized your vehicle." The general turned to face the crowd directly. "This vehicle you've been mocking in 1974. It transported 18 wounded soldiers through an active ambush zone without lights, without radio communication under direct enemy fire." The influencer lowered his camera slowly. "The live stream forgotten. The rust you're laughing at." The general continued, running a hand along the truck's fender. "That's from Riverwater when Sergeant Harlan drove through enemy territory after bridges were destroyed. These dents you think are so funny, that's shrapnel damage. Each one represents a bullet or fragment that hit metal instead of human flesh." The parking lot had grown completely still. Even the birds seemed to have paused their singing. "This truck," the general said, voice hardening, "and this man saved 23 American lives in a single night. Operation Desert Shield, classified until 9/9/C. He drove without headlights, navigating by memory alone for 6 hours while wounded men lay in the back." One of the young men who had been laughing loudest stepped forward, face flushed with shame. "Sir, we didn't know." "That," the general replied sharply, "is precisely the problem with this country. We don't look beyond surfaces anymore." He turned back to Emmett. "The president sends his regards, Sergeant. When I told him I was passing through your town, he specifically asked me to extend his gratitude if I happened to see you." Emmett nodded once, uncomfortable with the attention, but standing tall beneath it. An elderly man pushed through the crowd, moving with purpose despite his cane. "Harlan," he called, voice breaking. "Emmett Harlan from the 5th Transport." Emmett's stoic expression softened. "Vega, you pulled me out," the man said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "July 74. Night extraction. I never thought I'd see you again." The two men embraced without another word. A half-century of life falling away in an instant. The general stepped back, allowing them their moment. Around them, phones had stopped recording mockery and were now capturing something entirely different. Authentic recognition. Long overdue. If this moment hit your heart, share it and subscribe for more real stories that honor the silent warriors among us. Within the hour, the town transformed around Emmett's truck. The mayor arrived breathless, summoned by urgent texts about a 4-star general in their normally quiet community. News vans pulled up, reporters straightening ties and applying makeup before approaching for interviews. Emmett stood quietly beside his truck, enduring the attention with the same stoicism he'd shown during the mockery. The sudden recognition seemed to discomfort him more than the earlier ridicule. The MPs had established a respectful perimeter, keeping the growing crowd at a distance while allowing Emmett space to breathe. Vega remained at his side, the two veterans occasionally exchanging quiet words that carried more weight than all the public commentary surrounding them. The influencer who had led the mockery approached cautiously, camera now hanging unused at his side. His followers were flooding his live stream with comments demanding he apologize, their earlier encouragement of his cruelty now conveniently forgotten. "Sir," he began, voice uncharacteristically subdued, "I want to apologize publicly. What I did was inexcusable." Emmett studied him for a long moment, eyes revealing nothing. Then he simply extended his hand. "We all make mistakes," he said quietly. "The important thing is recognizing them when we do." The young man's surprise at such easy forgiveness was evident as they shook hands. A moment captured by photographers that would later appear on front pages across the state. By early afternoon, the local Veterans of Foreign Wars chapter had arrived with a bronze plaque they ceremonially attached to the concrete near Emmett's parking space. "This spot marks where disrespect met dignity. Sergeant Major Emmett Harlan, Special Forces Transport Division, 1962. His truck carried heroes home." Emmett declined all interview requests, uncomfortable with attention after decades of anonymity. But when pressed by the persistent local news anchor, he offered one brief statement. "We didn't drive these trucks for recognition. We drove them to bring our brothers home. Some things are more important than appearances." The simple wisdom of his words resonated beyond the immediate crowd, spreading rapidly through social media channels that had just hours earlier been sharing mockery of the same man. That evening, after crowds had dispersed and Emmett had returned to his modest ranch house on the outskirts of town, The general's SUV appeared in his driveway. He carried a letter bearing the presidential seal, an official invitation to Washington, and an offer to preserve Emmett's historic vehicle in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, with full restoration, and an exhibit detailing its service. Emmett read it twice, then shook his head. "It's still got miles left in it," he told the general quietly, "and I've still got places to be." The general smiled, understanding. "I thought you might say, so I've arranged an alternative." Within days, a specialized military maintenance team arrived at Emmett's home, not to take the truck but to service it, addressing critical safety issues while preserving its historical integrity. They replaced worn brake lines, reinforced the frame where necessary, and rebuilt the aging transmission. But they left the dents, they left the rust. They understood that some scars tell essential stories. On Veterans Day, 3 weeks later, Emmett led the town's parade, the first time he had participated since his retirement in 1999. In his freshly serviced but still battle-worn truck carried Vega and 2 other veterans from their unit who had emerged after hearing Emmett's story on regional news. The same influencer who had once mocked Emmett now live-streamed the parade with respectful commentary, educating his followers about the significance of the vehicle and the quiet heroism it represented. Streets lined with people fell silent as the truck passed, many holding handmade signs. "Thank you, Sergeant Major Harlan." And not all heroes wear uniforms. The truck's engine, powerful and true despite its age, rumbled through town, a mechanical heartbeat that had kept time through war and peace, through mockery and honor. When the parade ended at the town square, Emmett finally spoke to the gathered community, his voice strong despite his preference for silence. "This truck isn't special because of who drove it. It's special because of who it carried. Remember them, especially the ones who never got to ride home." The general, standing nearby in civilian clothes, nodded in understanding. Some vehicles are more than transportation. They're lifelines, testimonies, promises. Winter gave way to spring, but something had fundamentally changed in the town. The auto shop class at the local high school had built a perfect half-scale replica of Emmett's truck for their engineering project, meticulously recreating every dent and rust patch from detailed photographs. Emmett visited their workshop, walking slowly around their creation with a craftsman's eye. "Not bad," he said, the hint of a smile breaking through his usual reserve. "But you missed the dent on the left rear panel. That one saved my life in '74 when a sniper's bullet hit steel instead of flesh." They added the dent that afternoon. The town launched a new program, Silent Heroes. Local veterans remembered, documenting the stories of those who had served without fanfare and returned to live quiet lives of dignity in their community. Emmett volunteered 2 afternoons each week at the high school auto shop, not for payment, but because trucks don't fix themselves and neither do kids. His patient instruction and occasional gruff praise became sought after by students who discovered that mechanical knowledge was only part of what the old soldier had to teach. The coffee shop, where he had once been mocked, now displayed a large photograph of Emmett's truck on its wall alongside a simple placard, "Judge less, listen more." Emmett's Chevy continued its daily duties, grocery runs, hardware store visits, trips to the VA hospital to drive older veterans to appointments. But now people nodded respectfully when it passed. Some saluted, others simply acknowledged with a kind word what they had previously dismissed. The young influencer who had led the mockery followed through on his promise to change. He started a successful video series called Hidden Heroes, featuring the extraordinary stories of ordinary-looking people and objects. Emmett's truck was the first episode, which garnered millions of views and launched his legitimate career as a documentarian. 1 year after the incident, the town renamed its vocational education center after Emmett, who attended the ceremony, but predictably declined to speak. Instead, he handed each graduating student a small replica truck key with a message attached: "Keep moving forward. Someone's counting on you." The general remained in contact, calling monthly to check on his old friend. During one such call, he asked Emmett why he had kept the truck all these years when he could have afforded something newer. "Some things," Emmett replied after a thoughtful pause, "earn the right to stay with you no matter how they look to others. That truck and I, we made a promise a long time ago. We finished this journey together, and so they continue." The old soldier and his faithful vehicle moving with purpose through a community that finally sees them both for what they truly are, not relic survivors, living testaments to the understanding that true value isn't in appearance but in endurance. Subscribe to Steelheart Stories if you believe true respect is earned, not shouted, and never rusts.